What's BLM's stance on Kamala Harris? They think the Democrats need to open a primary at the convention, and they are angry that Kamala Harris has been authoritarianly slot in. Like, the actual black people are saying no, 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 no. And yet you have this call that has prevented black people from joining. It's white women for Kamala. What does that mean? No black people. We can't have the black people spoiling our fictional black people that are telling us to do this.
We are here because BIPOC women have tapped us in as white women to step up, listen, and get involved this election season. If you find yourself talking over or speaking for BIPOC individuals, or God forbid, correcting them, just take a beat. And instead, we can put our listening ears on.
It brought back to me a feeling of anxiety and rage that I haven't felt for well over 20 years. But that feeling of being trapped and stuck in someone else's tyranny, but that weird cheerful tyranny of, I hope you were paying attention and doing this menial thing that nobody needed to do.
I actually love this. The Democrats today are the party of Professor Umbridge.
Oh,
and I need
yes,
to
it had
put, like,
Umbridge vibes. Ooh.
Good morning, children.
Would you like to know more?
Hello, Malcolm. I am very excited to be introducing this episode because I, as a white woman, just watched delayed basis the White Women for Kamala Harris Zoom call that broke Zoom, that broke records, that broke
the
glass
entire
ceilings.
4-hour or whatever call you watched.
I watched the whole thing. Well, I'm a white woman. This was a call to action of my people. And
first of all, can I just like say how insanely racist this is? Imagine if there was like a Trump campaign that was like white women for Trump. Wait, what? That is but Democrats have become so racist in their entire ideology, but they can't see anything racist when it's connected to things that are pro-Democrat. They just ignore it.
Well, I don't know. Like, I feel like what a progressive woman would say about a white woman rally for Trump. You know, what do you call a white woman rally for Trump? It would just be a white nationalist rally. Like, that's how they see
That's
things.
what they want to frame things as, but
Yes.
as we mentioned in the past, there are not, by the statistics, more racists who vote for Trump than who vote for the Democrats.
Don't let mainstream media know that.
Actually, this made-up narrative is actually really important to a point I'm going to make right here.
Okay.
And I think it frames this rally in like the most messed up possible sense.
Okay.
So they keep saying things like, you know, BIPOC women have tapped us in, and like, you know, don't speak over black women. And all of this is like about hypothetical black people. So I think, okay, real black people from a progressive standpoint, who these days is the voice of black people, and especially black women, because the organization is run by a black woman. It would be BLM, right? So what is
No one
BLM?
talks about BLM anymore. Have you noticed that?
Well, yeah, because what's BLM's stance on Kamala Harris?
Oh, what is BLM's stance on Kamala Harris?
They think the Democrats need to open a primary at the convention, and they should be choosing a candidate, and that they are incredibly angry that Kamala Harris has been authoritarianly slot in.
Oh,
And so
but even during the BLM associated riots of the pandemic, she was fundraising for bail release funds. I don't understand why they would be opposed to her. I know her past has been very pro-police.
No, Simone, you know exactly
She
why they're opposed to
repented.
her.
Isn't repenting what the woke movement is all about?
No, an inability to repent is what the woke movement is about. So for people who like don't know Kamala Harris's history, I'll give two little incidents here. In one incident, because a lot of people like conflate like her history, like Republicans have reduced it to talking points where they mix it up and they sort of lower the severity of it. Like I'll talk with a Republican and they'll say something like, "Don't you know that she didn't release innocent black people from prison as like prison labor?" And I'm like, that didn't happen. you're confusing two different events. And it's actually worse when you take the events on their face. In one event, there was a lab mistake, and she was supposed to notify the lawyers of literally thousands of Black inmates that they were up for potential release. She chose not to because she wanted to secure the endorsement from the police commission to win her next election cycle. She did secure the endorsement. She did win the next election cycle. And then right afterwards, she started letting everyone out. So she kept them in jail longer to win an election. And then in a separate event, the Supreme Court came and said the prison conditions in California are becoming dangerously overcrowded, and it's a human rights abuse by the US Constitution. And then a court meeting in California came together and they're like, yeah, we really need to release people. And so then they went to Kamala Harris's office, and Kamala Harris's office literally, like, it's not like a subjective thing. They literally said, we cannot release these people because we need them for a prison work program right now. Specifically, it was fire season and they were being used for fire prevention. The weird thing is that if they had released them and paid them, it would have been cheaper than keeping them in the prison system.
Oh,
but
no.
I suppose, would you have any different a thought from someone
that could have been such a win to release prisoners and then give them immediate jobs?
But you've got to remember, she's descended from plantation owners. That is her mindset. It's the plantation owner mindset.
Wait, they were owners and not
No, yeah, her family
people?
owned a plantation in Jamaica. And the plantations in Jamaica were far more brutal than the ones in the US. They were
right, yeah, you would just go and die there, right.
Yeah, they were expected to die. They didn't really care about intergenerational stuff. Kamala Harris is like, there is a reason why BLM would be like, okay, like, I know she did some performative stuff for us, but like, you get who this person is. So I'm going to play a clip for you guys right after knowing that, like, the actual Black people are saying, no, and yet you have this call that has prevented Black people from joining. It's white women for Kamala. What does that mean? No Black people. We can't have the Black people spoiling our fictional Black people that are telling us to do this.
We are here because BIPOC women have tapped us in as white women to step up, listen, and get involved this election season. This is a really important time, and we all need to use our voices and influence for the greater good, like we are tonight, because the toxic feels smaller when we support each other. But don't make it about yourself. As white women, we need to use our privilege to make positive changes. If you find yourself talking over or speaking for BIPOC individuals, or God forbid, correcting them, just take a beat. And instead, we can put our listening ears on. So do learn from and amplify the voices of those who have been historically marginalized, and use the privilege you have in order to push for systemic change. As white people, we have a lot to learn and unlearn. So do check your blind spots. You are responsible for your algorithm, believe it or not. Intentionally seek out and share content from BIPOC creators, activists, thought leaders. They should be the leaders of conversations about race and justice and equity. So just whatever you do, don't stay silent on issues of injustice. Big changes can start with just one person who's brave enough to speak up. I know when you see some headlines or someone makes a wild claim, it can be really shocking, but do give yourself permission to pause, take a breath, and do a Google search and ask questions and be critical of the sources. I was a kindergarten teacher, and sometimes we would read stories, and I know I have some of my former students here and their families. Hi. We would learn about a historical event, and I would ask my students, who is missing from this story? This is not a concept or question that I invented, but it's something that I was taught as a way to decenter the Eurocentric and white voices that are often at the forefront of our history books and our media.
So there's a few things I want to note about the language here. One is when we talk about how progressives have divided this society into a caste system where some people are more deserving of human dignity than other people, and part of it is race-based. If you are willing to go along with the urban monoculture, the progressive machine on everything, and you are Black or BIPOC or whatever word they want to use here, right? You gain the ability to speak over other people and demand that they concede to anything you're telling them, no matter how outlandish it is. That's what they're saying here. But what's really interesting is if you are Black, even if you are a popular Black, like the Black Lives Matter people, and you go against them in any way, no matter how much social credit you had with them in the past, immediately you lose your Blackness. Your Black card is removed from you. You gain any special status that gave you. You are now a race traitor, as they would say, because they have stolen your racial identity and are now using it in sort of this priestly way, but you can only get the privileges of the priest caste if you do not challenge them on anything. It is macabre and horrible. Essentially, progressives appropriated the Black identity and now deny that identity to real Black people if they do not act like human puppets for what these white progressive women want people to say. So individuals like this essentially are putting their hands up the back of the Black community and attempting to use that community like a puppet. And whenever anyone is like, well, actually, Kamala Harris has been really, really terrible to the Black community, they're like, oh, I'm sorry, you're not Black anymore. It's not even like we disagree with you. You are no longer one of these people who deserve all of the special status and privileges that she just delineated for Black individuals, i.e., believe them even when what they say goes beyond what you think is reasonable or possible. But also,
well, I think in a very patronizing way,
yeah,
they're saying we know better. So they're overtaking their view or discounting it because they believe that if they were to question the nomination and run of Kamala Harris, that the Democratic Party's ability to win the presidential seat is compromised. And anything that would contribute to Trump winning is a direct threat to their power hierarchy. And we'll say, let's, Black Lives Matter. Well, to protect Black people, we have to make sure that at all costs, Trump can't win. So we can't let Black people do anything that would cause Trump to possibly have higher odds of winning. So anything they say that goes against what we think will cause Kamala Harris to win or the Democratic Party to win has to be completely ignored.
But they're literally here saying don't talk over Black people, and yet this entire call is talking
right.
over Black
But
people.
What's more important, if they were an AI and we ask the AI questions to sort of see how it sorts philosophical weights of things, they would say that the cultural, legal, legislative, regulatory sanctity of Black people is more important than not talking over Black people.
Well, I actually think that you're sort of giving them a little too much credit here. I think that what's really happening is there's multiple groups that are making decisions here. One group is the people who are in the Biden White House right now and want to maintain their jobs and positions of power. And they make up the core of the Democratic bureaucracy at the moment. And they know that if Kamala versus somebody else wins, they have a much higher chance of keeping all of their positions and everything like that. I mean, if a new Democrat is running, especially one that may be has different beliefs than someone like Kamala and is more anti-establishment, like a Bernie or something like that, they all lose their jobs, right? So, or a good chunk of them does. So I also understand their motivation. They need to not have a real primary here. And then you have the big funders and everything like that. And the big funders want to control what's going on. And Kamala has shown herself as somebody who takes orders from them without much complaint at all. She has actually repeatedly shown herself as a good order taker from the donor class. And so they don't want somebody like a Bernie, someone who's for the base. As we mentioned, big business moved to the left and intergenerational wealth moved to the left, where they used to be right-wing factions. Kamala is sort of the face of those interest groups and has shown herself incredibly loyal to those interest groups. And I think these groups, as much as they fear Trump, they also fear the base, because the base removes their power and also goes against most of their interests. They have very little in common with the base's interests. Then you have the type of like brainwashed woman on this call, and we'll be going over different quotes from them in this.
Wild.
These women are just in a cult.
Can we talk about the woman and her therapist? So just because this is so relevant, at one point, one of the speakers during this call, Glennon Doyle, talks about a conversation that she had with her therapist in which she shared her anxiety about being a political organizer in this election, and that she was really concerned about the social capital that she was going to burn through.
Mm-hmm.
And Malcolm, you can play the clip.
I was talking to my therapist this week about this hovering fear of mine. And she said, yeah, but what if every single bit of trust and credibility and social capital we have each built was saved up just for this moment? What if for this historic, vital moment, for our future, for our sisters, for our children, what if we just spent it all? That's how this goes. Mistakes will be made and feelings will be hurt. And I will say out loud that I feel afraid about that because we white women do not yet know how not to turn on each other. I don't know how yet either. But this time I'm going to learn. Because listen to me, this moment could be historic in a different way too. We as a group of white women could do this moment and this 102 days differently. We could put ourselves out there and we could make mistakes and get scared and disagree and hurt each other's feelings and still stay connected to each other. We could let people be angry with us and disapprove of us and mock us even and not take our ball and go home. We could decide to care more about our children's futures than our own comfort. We could not just post trust Black women. We could also start doing it. We could recognize that Black women know how to do this and we do not.
I gave it to you.
I'm playing it right now.
She basically says that her therapist says, burn it. Her therapist is telling her to pursue a political agenda. And it's wild to me, after hearing all of your discussion about therapy being a progressive cult and all these other things, I hear you and I agree with you. The incentives are there. I've heard these conversations as well. And yet still, every time we see more evidence of this and just how egregious it is, that literally you have a woman saying, I feel really uncomfortable about what I'm doing socially right now with the election, politically speaking. And a therapist is saying, no, burn your reputation, burn your social capital, cause a lot of anxiety, hurt your friendships because it matters for this election and we have to win. That is so incredible.
I told you that this is like, I think I tell our audiences, I'm like, you do not understand. The modern therapy movement has become taken over by a cult, and this is part of the urban monoculture. It's one of their priest casts, and it is used to communicate. Like when you go to therapy, basically, you are an android, and you are allowing somebody to open the back of your head and tinker with all of the parts, right? Like if you were an android, you'd pay a lot of attention that that person doesn't have like an ideological motivation and they're not going to rewire you to achieve their ideological ends. And yet that is exactly what has happened. And you see this, it's such a common, like if you go online and you watch like the craziest like lefty YouTubers, there's really almost every time they're in one of two professions. They are either a teacher for secondary or primary school, i.e. from kindergarten to high school, or they are a therapist. Like you look at somebody like Fundy Fridays, right? Like her partner is a therapist.
Oh, John?
Yeah, he's a social worker therapist. So it is horrifying to me, and you really do need to be. And I'd also say with husbands, we're going to do an episode. We haven't done it yet. It's like the therapy to divorce pipeline.
Oh yeah, we
like,
still have to do that.
Oh my gosh. Like if your wife is like, I'm thinking about therapy, like you really need to, this is not 90s therapy. This is more like saying, I'm thinking about joining Scientology. Every alarm bell should be raised.
I think also though, what Glennon Doyle, this woman whose therapist told her to burn it all, was very indicative of what many progressive women and people are too, which is they're doing this because it's the societal norm and they want to be liked. She describes at the beginning of her speech how when she first decided to start organizing politically and trying to get people involved and spread the word, that she expected to be praised and loved for it and celebrated for it. And I think that that's what gets a lot of people into this. They see that everyone's rallying around how evil one side is and how good the other side is, so that if they start organizing for the good side, everyone's going to open their doors when they go door knocking and say, oh, thank God you're out there, I'm so glad. And then they actually go out door knocking and people are irritable and mad and whatever, just because they're having bad days. And it's tough, and that kind of ruins it. But then their therapists go out and tell them to do it anyway. So I thought that was interesting too, because I think that that's another big element of this. And everyone in that call felt so, they felt either like very thirsty for approval people, or they felt like condescending school teachers or mean girls.
Yeah, let's play this school teacher clip, because this was like insane. I was like, wow. She's like, you guys are idiots, is what she thinks of these people.
Thank you, Shannon. Did everybody do their homework and write down 3 things? Write it down in your notes app, jot it down on a piece of paper, the 3 things you are going to do to impact this election.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Hearing this was insane. It took me, I felt I'm not going to just misuse the word PTSD, but it brought back to me a feeling of anxiety and rage that I haven't felt for well over 20 years. But that feeling of being trapped and stuck in someone else's tyranny, but that weird cheerful tyranny of, I hope you were paying attention and doing this menial thing that nobody needed to do.
I actually love this. The Democrats today are the party of Professor Umbridge.
Oh,
and I need
yes,
to
it had
put, like,
Umbridge vibes. Ooh.
Good morning, children.
That's just what I see whenever I see like these progressive white women for Harris is like Umbridge for Harris.
I'm sure I must have misunderstood you, Professor. So silly of me, but it sounded for a moment as though you were suggesting that the ministry had ordered the attack on this boy.
The entire vibe of the call, everything they're saying, it's like, how can we get Voldemort elected? How can we get, Mrs. Plantation owner elected? When like everyone else knows this is a terrible idea from,
And well, and a lot of it also felt so much like cope. At the beginning of the call, one person says, oh, this proves how electable Kamala Harris is, when talking about how many people had joined the call and how much interest there had been and how much funds had been raised.
And remind you guys, drink water, stay hydrated, because we have another 3.5 months of this. And I think all this energy just like proves how electable Kamala Harris is.
And there's definitely this trying to psych yourself up thing going on right now, which is really interesting as well. Of we are going to convince ourselves into believing that this is a thing. It's going to be okay.
Where'd you get witches for Harris? I didn't see that clip yet.
Well, in asking for donations, shortly after that, the same speaker, I think one of the organizers, said, in trying to fundraise, because this was a fundraising call, said to share the fundraising link in whatever your favorite chat thread is on your mobile device, like your Signal or WhatsApp or Telegram chat thread, group thread. And her personal favorite group thread on her phone is Witches for Harris, which just also felt like such a white progressive woman thing.
My personal favorite one on my phone is called Witches for Harris. So I will be dropping the link into my Witches for Harris. Get your friends to donate. Let's start to feel our collective power.
It shows what we're fighting against. We're literally fighting against the devil here. And I think
they're owning it, just like we owned deplorables, but still, we are deplorables.
There's a bit of a difference when we don't own deplorables and saying that we are deplorables. We are pointing out that they dehumanize their opponents. They literally are like, yeah, let's worship pagan gods.
No, but hold on.
They literally dehumanize people in the call.
Yeah, Pink. So the artist Pink was literally on her private jet flying back from a show, joining this call because she was so amped to join. And she says that the other choice, clearly referring, of course, to Trump and Republicans, doesn't feel human. And she actually caught herself in saying doesn't feel human. That was her correction. She started with the other choice doesn't or isn't. And then she changed doesn't feel human. She really meant to say the other choice isn't human.
I know that we're better than this. And I know that Kamala is going to fucking get us there. because the other choice is not, it doesn't feel human. And I'm terrified.
These are monsters. And
And that's how they think of them. This is where you get things like the bear meme that we've done a video on.
yeah, the
where
other
it's
choice
like
isn't
women,
human. Wow.
they have been trained.
Mhm.
These white women, unthinking class has been trained to see men as monsters. When they
Mhm.
say something like, I would rather be with a bear in the woods than a random man, and you change this to anything else, and you're like, because I did that in the video, I changed it to like, would you rather be with a random black man in the woods or a
Yeah.
bear? Black.
Man is scary. With a bear. Well, I've heard about bears. They don't always attack you, right? So maybe a bear. Probably a bear. Oh, 100% a bear, which is like terrifying to say, but definitely a bear. Some
Black.
men are very scary out there. A bear.
Even some men are saying bear, although we could predict that this man's opinion will be whatever makes women approve of him.
If I were alone in the woods, would you rather me encounter a bear or a
Black.
man?
I feel more like bear. I don't know, because I feel like I would know what the outcome would be with a bear.
And you're like, whoa! Like, you realize as soon as you are no longer coding things in the progressive way, how far off the rails they have gone into bigotry and dehumanization.
Mhm.
You immediately like wake up and you're like cold water, like, oh my God, they are Nazis. They are like at very, very high level stages of dehumanizing their enemies. And we need to fight back against this if we do not want our country to fall. Now, fortunately, this is a one generation thing. If we can keep it out of the hands of them for this generation, they're not having kids. They are only converting kids, and that cannot replenish their numbers. If we could just for 30 years prevent us from descending into a fascist totalitarian state, we're fine. All right. So
All right.
just, come on, guys. Just for like the next 3 election cycles, turn out at the polls, and then it's over.
Fast
Okay.
boys. Yeah.
Hold fast. They've really begun to treat her and the black women who go along with the message, obviously not the ones who don't, they are worse than dirt to these people, as like this weird ethereal cast of people who can't make mistakes and do everything right.
And, you know, it's funny because like so many things in my life, tonight's call started out as a social media post. Just a few hours after President Biden announced he wasn't running and he was endorsing Kamala Harris to be the nominee, I watched Black women instantly mobilize to uplift and support her. And it made me wonder whether white women could and would do the same.
The magical black woman.
The magical black woman. Yeah, they really are like magical Negro trope. I'm not saying that as a slur. I'm saying that as a trope from
You're
like
referring to the name of
and
the
the
trope.
recent movie. Yeah, it's wild to hear. And this call more than anything, where I have recently, you know, I go on about, oh, progressivism is becoming like a cult. And I'm like, bro, it is a cult. Like, if you listen to this language, this reminds me of like the Scientology leaks, where you had those videos of like like I think it was like Tom Cruise talking to other Scientologists, like looking insane and like, and you're like, whoa, those guys are off their rocker. Like, white women for Harris was like the Scientology leaks in terms of how crazy off the wall it was, and how absolutely brainwashed these people were, and how absolutely they were selling out their children's futures and living in a completely delusional world and completely dehumanizing Black people.
Something.
But what about some of these other ones you had here?
So I reached out to Joteka Edie. She is the organizer of Win with Black Women, and I wanted to get her counsel. And she told me that white women did need to come together in community to do the work because our work is very different. We are starting at a significant deficit. White women in America make up over 40% of the electorate. We are the nation's largest voting bloc. But since the 1950s, most of us have voted for Republican presidential candidates in all but just 2 presidential elections. despite repeated predictions before every single election that white women might shift toward the Democratic presidential candidate. It hasn't happened. The bad news is that a majority of white women repeatedly vote for Republicans because too many of us believe, consciously or subconsciously, that it is in our best interest to use our privilege and our support systems of white supremacy and the patriarchy to benefit us.
What confused me, is at one point Shannon Watts on the call notes that white women in America make up over 40% of the electorate, that they're the electorate, that they are the largest voting bloc, and historically they voted Republican. She says because women have believed that the white patriarchy is their best way to privilege, and that now they have the power to discover that the white patriarchy has to be taken down. I was surprised to read that women historically have voted Republican. It's not what I would expect. I would expect that they would always vote in the more progressive end of the spectrum because they are the empathetic, on average, more empathetic gender.
Well, I mean, remember, we've gone through multiple party realignments throughout the history of this country, and Republicans, I mean, I think always have been at their core is they are the anti-authoritarian party. And women, I think, generally, historically wanted to put the power in the hands of their family, right? That was the goal, to be able to make the decisions for their family that they wanted to make. This idea that women are now democratic is only the case if you're talking about single women. If you divide society into groups, married men, single men, married women, single women, the only one of those four groups that majority votes for Harris and not Trump is single women. And what has moved women into this democratic state is that just many, many more of them are single.
Lower rates of marriage. Interesting.
And why are single women more likely to be pro-Democrat? Is because they want the social services that previously were handled by the family structure. You know, who cares for you when you're old? It's your kids. You know, who is the person you rely on when you get sick? It's your husband. But now because they don't have any of that, they need a state to be handling all that for them. But I'd also say that just this mimetic virus of the urban monoculture, historically, women were always the more spiritual group. They were always the more religious group in American history. And when they went away from traditional religions, they were caught up much more in these cults than men were. And these cults appealed to them in terms of like just total brain hegemony more than they did to men, is my read of what's going on there.
Yeah, that makes sense. I still found it quite surprising. And I mean, hey, this is a meaningful voting bloc, so it matters. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so interested in Megan Dom's Unspeakeasy retreats of women. Obviously, it's not all white women, but I feel like women as a voting bloc are often misrepresented online because they're not necessarily the most active online participants. And at least normal women, neurotypical women. And they are a large, both consumer and voting bloc. So their choices matter a lot, but it's hard to get what's going on in their minds. I guess you can by just going on Instagram and seeing what their lives are about. But in terms of what they believe, it's harder for me to understand.
The final point I wanted to make about all of this has been really shocking for me is the way that the Democratic talking classes have like whiplash shifted between different major talking points recently. So when you were going over this with me this morning,
I found it really notable how quick opinions were to change. And I think a lot of it's because the mooring point for people isn't truth or reality. It is whatever you have to believe. And you see this in the white women for Harris call. Whatever you have to believe that is more likely to reduce the odds that the other side wins. So if it looks like Harris is running, well, then she's the best woman ever. If it looks like Biden is running, then he's sharp as a tack. If it looks like he just decided to step down, well, he's our next generation's George Washington. But that this self-censorship and this intentional manipulation or memory holing is a product of believing that the alternative that would come from any other belief is too dangerous, even if it may be true. So I think there's this
I think
interesting concept of dangerous truths, and normally that comes in the in the context of state-based censorship or totalitarian regime-based censorship. But in this case, it's urban monoculture-based censorship. So the call is coming from inside the house. It is the memes that run our brain that are telling us, you literally can't believe this. You now have to believe this new thing. And so seeing it come, it's an endogenous change that's based on someone's being ruled by this particular culture. That's really interesting to watch, because normally you expect to see this kind of creepy reality shifting only happening because people are like, oh, someone's going to shoot me in the head if I don't toe the line.
Well, I mean, so the way you said it to me this morning that I found so powerful is you're like, it was so weird to have like the entire Democratic Party being like, Biden's the best. Biden is totally mentally stable. Everything's good, blah, blah, blah. To, we really need to do something about Biden. To, now, of course, Biden shouldn't have been running. And Kamala Harris is the best candidate ever. And we don't need to be holding no more thought about this. It's
well, yeah, and before a discussion of Kamala being kind of a weak running mate and a liability.
Yeah, a lot of people, when they were like talking about bringing Biden down, they were like,
yeah, they're like, well, who else? And this is an opportunity for us to get someone really great. There was so much excitement about anyone who wasn't Biden Harris.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we could get something new. We could get something new.
And now
it's
we're
so
pretending
cool.
like this never happened. I mean, it reminds me of what happened during COVID, where they're like, if you wear a mask, you're killing people because the masks need to go to doctors.
Yeah, and then how dare you not wear a mask? You're killing us right now.
This whiplash, like, and I remember at the beginning where they're like, well, masks aren't even relevant for lay people.
Yeah, they don't even work. Yeah,
they don't even work. And then it was the exact opposite. And it was like, what? Are you like Dory from like Finding Nemo? Like, do you not remember that 2 weeks ago? Or like, well, we need to flatten the curve. It's just 2 weeks, 2 months, a year and a half. It's like, what? Like,
we've all just decided to take after our current president, Biden, who
just
theoretically is
wakes up every morning and has somebody tell him what's happening that day. But no, this another thing that really got me is the Democrats have been attacking Republicans for their disjointed attacks on Harris, where they're like, oh, they don't have like a common theme in these attacks, which shows that they don't have any real attack. And it's like, no, it's that they're actually human beings with diverse opinions and not like have little radio antennas in their head that get beamed to them whatever the current talking point is, and then they all just repeat it like robots. Like it right now, when I talk about like the mimetic virus, people may underestimate how literal I'm being with that. If you talk about this ultra urban monoculture people, these ultra progressives, you watch a call like this, it's exactly like those ants that get infected with a fungus, and it like eats out all of their brains, all of their innards, and their entire life just becomes about spreading that fungus. They stop caring about anything else. They go out there, castrate their own children. They are just about climbing to the top of a vine or a stick and then having their head split open and the spores spill out into the air, because that is all that their lives are for anymore.
Spores from a parasitic fungus called cordyceps have infiltrated their bodies and their mind. Its infected brain directs this ant upwards. Those afflicted that are discovered by the workers are quickly taken away and dumped far away from the colony. It seems extreme, but this is the reason why. Like something out of science fiction, the fruiting body of the cordyceps erupts from the ant's head, and when finished, the deadly spores will burst from its tip. The fungus is so virulent it can wipe out whole colonies of ants, and it's not just ants that fall victim to this killer hand. The more numerous a species becomes, the more likely it will be attacked.
We are fighting a fungally infected, brain-eaten zombie horde against the forces of ideological and cultural diversity, because they represent the antithesis of that. And we need to fight like the lives of our children depend on it, because they really might at this point. Or you could say I'm overstepping. You're always the one who like dials things back. You're like, Malcolm, you're being a nutter.
After watching this call, I wonder if maybe I'm being too moderating in my analysis.
Did they really feel like a cult to you, or was that just me? Where it
felt very cult. It felt very cult-like. Yes, I was a little creeped out by it. Just tiny bit.
And I love when the progressives try to like say like, oh no, Trump rallies are a cult, and I'm like, no, that's enthusiasm. That's genuine human enthusiasm. Like it's like
There are wackos on both political sides. So here I'm going to come in. Moderate Simone's going to come in. There are wackos on both sides, and everyone's an asshole. So it's choosing if you want the giant douche or the turd sandwich. You disagree with me.
Yeah, I just, what is your final takeaway on this?
It's cult. It's a cult.
I love you, Simone.
I love
Have
you
a wonderful day.
You too.